Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Hey, welcome to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. Glad to have you with me. So yesterday I was driving back from lunch with a friend of mine. We had gone to Zadie's, a fantastic Jewish deli down in Cherry Creek. If you've not been to Zadie's, and those of you out of town, if you come into town and you want a really good Jewish deli, you go to Zadie's. Zaidys. Anyway, so on the way back home, I'm listening to Fox News, and Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar are giving their press conference about how they have been stifled, how they have been silenced, how they can't talk about anything, and those evil Jews are trying to keep the wonderful Muslims from coming into the country. And I may have mentioned yesterday that she tweeted out that, well, she tweeted herself. She didn't tweet herself. I'm sorry. She tweeted, and then she retweeted her tweet and added a comment to it. In the original tweet, which was on August 16, she said this: "When I won, it gave the Palestinian people hope that someone will finally speak the truth about the inhumane conditions. I can't allow the state of Israel to take away that light by humiliating me and use my love for my city," I guess it's her grandmother, "to bow down to their oppressive and racist policies." So tweeting that wasn't good enough. She decided that now she has to retweet that and add some commentary. And the commentary to her tweet says this: "Silencing me and treating me like a criminal is not what she wants for me," meaning her grandmother. "It would kill a piece of me. I have decided that visiting my grandmother under these oppressive conditions stands against everything I believe in, fighting against," and pay close attention, "I have decided that visiting my grandmother under these oppressive conditions stands against everything I believe in, fighting against racism, oppression, and injustice." Oh. So I kind of woke up this morning wondering, I wonder what she thinks about Palestine's efforts to silence a very specific community by making them live under oppressive conditions as if they were criminals, which clearly runs counter, I think, to everything that Congresswoman Tlaib says she believes in, fighting against racism, oppression, and injustice. Palestinian Authority police have banned a Palestinian LGBT rights group. Now, for those of you living under a rock, maybe you're living under a rock in Palestine. And in fact, if you're living I'm going to say something awful here, but it's never stopped me before. If you're living under a rock in Palestine, it probably means that you've been stoned to death and you're under a pile of rocks. But if those of you who live in this country and you're living under a pile of rocks somewhere, it's not because somebody stoned you, it's because you got your stupid head in the sand. LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender rights. Yes. Palestinian Authority Popo have banned a Palestinian lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender rights group from organizing any activities in the West Bank, has threatened to arrest them, saying that such activities are contrary to the values of Palestinian society. In a statement released Saturday, police spokesman Louis Arzika said events such as those organized by the group Al-Qaz, quote, "go against and infringe upon the higher principles and values of Palestinian society," period, close quote. This Popo spokesman also charged that suspicious parties, cue up Elvis, Suspicious Minds. Arzika also charged that suspicious parties were trying to, quote, "sow discord and undermine Palestinian society's peaceful state of affairs," close quote, and asserted that the Popo would pursue Al-Qaz staff and turn them over to judicial authorities if it successfully collars them. Now, I was going to insert a joke about collaring, a lesbian or a gay person, but I'm going to refrain from doing that. Insert your own joke here. Now, while there are no Palestinian Authority laws on the books that ban homosexual acts, the Palestinian LGBT community largely exists underground because of familial, religious, and government repression, according to a source familiar with the matter, who spoke on condition of anonymity when talking to the Times of Israel. Generally, when you speak on conditions of anonymity and you're talking about something that you say, well, there are no laws that ban these acts, but I don't want anybody to know that I might be gay or bisexual or lesbian or transsexual, and I'm talking to the Times of Israel, so I'm going to talk on condition of anonymity. Now, here's a little postscript. Israel is one of the most inclusive societies in the world for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. As early as the insert your own date here. What decade? What decade do you think that same-sex couples lived in Israel freely and without fear of persecution? I'll wait. Cue the what's the television game show where they're waiting for the final Jeopardy. Cue the Jeopardy final question. Have you come up with it? As early as the 1960s, SIXZERO, 1960s, same-sex couples lived in Israel freely and without fear of persecution. Now, the gay revolution of the 1980s brought Israel's LGBT community full recognition of their human rights, as well as legal and social equality to individuals and families. And today, Tel Aviv is considered the gay capital of the Middle East, thanks to its thriving and supported LGBT community that plays an integral role in Israeli society. Let's go back to Rashida Tlaib's tweet. She believes in fighting against racism, oppression, and injustice. Do you think she was going to go to Israel and go to the West Bank or meet with the Palestinian authorities, meet with Mahmoud Abbas, and stand up and demand in a public meeting that they quit harassing LGBT groups in the occupied West Bank? I just said occupied West Bank to see if anybody was paying attention. I'm so sick of these people. No, not the LGBTQ people. I'm sick of Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar. By the way, as I was listening to them on Fox News yesterday, I realized the error of my ways. For years, I have pronounced the word capital M-U-S-L-I-M as Muslim. Clearly, that's incorrect. Ilhan Omar refers to herself as a Muslim. So from now on, it is Muslim on the Michael Brown Unplugged podcast. And I would suggest you get in line too, because if you don't pronounce Muslim as Muslim, you're probably racist. Yeah, racist. That's what you are. God, I'm so sick. I'm sick of these people. And speaking of Muslims, I may have figured out why we haven't seen much coverage of the Philadelphia shooter. According to the website Jihad Watch, Robert Spencer writes that you can see from the impressive Zabiba on Maurice Hill's forehead that he is a devout Muslim. My deepest apologies. Let me restart the story. You can see from the impressive Zabiba, I think is how you pronounce it, Zebiba, on Maurice Hill's forehead that he is a devout Muslim. The Zabiba is a bruise that forms from the fact that the Muslims, oh, dang it, I'm going to need speech therapy. It's a bruise, often called a raisin. Yeah, a raisin. It's this bruise that forms on the forehead of Muslims from their 5 daily prayers when they perform these numerous prostrations, pressing their foreheads against the ground. The Zabiba is seen as a mark of intense piety. Now, I don't think that justifies what Maurice Hill did in trying to kill all those cops in Philadelphia, but I think it does help us understand exactly why we haven't seen the outrage and the nonstop coverage about a mass shooting and about how we got to get guns and assault weapons out of the hands of, well, just dumb white guys, because in this case, he's a devout Muslim. Yeah, that time I got the word right, devout Muslim. I'm actually dead serious. Do you think for a minute if, first of all, he didn't kill that many people. I don't think did he kill 2 people? I forget how many people he killed. But regardless of how many people he killed or did not kill, Do you think if a guy with that much firepower, holding that many cops off for that long, and having to have his lawyer come and negotiate an end to the standoff and his peaceful surrender, because I guarantee you, had this guy walked out without a lawyer, they would have shot him on spot. Absolutely. So do you think that there would have been there would have been nonstop coverage if Maurice Hill, instead of being a devout Muslim, had instead been, I don't know, a 25 to 35-year-old white male Christian that somewhere, somehow, in a tweet, in his Facebook, in a posting, or just because he's a white male between the ages of 25 and 35, he's therefore a white supremacist or a white nationalist. Do you think we would not still be talking about the attacks in Philadelphia? Of course we would be. But it turns out he's a devout Muslim, so nothing to see here, boys and girls. Move along. Just move along. I know there's a lot of cognitive dissonance in the world, and there's a lot of lack of self-awareness. And here's a great example of that. Democrat presidential hopeful Senator Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas. She went to a Native American forum Monday where the moderator had to encourage the attendees to clap for her. Well, before you hear it, listen to this. Let me tell you the story first. According to the Associated Press, she apologized to the crowd over her past claim to tribal heritage, directly attacking an area that's proved to be a big political liability. Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren offered a public apology Monday to Native Americans over her past claim to tribal heritage, directly tackling this area that's proved to be a big political liability, according to the AP. Like anyone, she said, who has been honest with themselves, I know I have made mistakes. Okay. I'm sorry for the harm I have caused. Her remarks were an effort to move past the fallout from her past claims of tribal ancestry, which obviously culminated in widely criticized release of her stupid DNA test. Bad staffing. Bad staffing. Here's how it went.
It's a wonderful day, and Native Americans across this country should celebrate the day. Today, we're sharing the stage with the future president, perhaps.
It's a pretty good clap, I'd say. Half-hearted, lukewarm, okay.
I would expect more excitement from our native citizens.
Oh, they're whooping and hollering. I would have expected more excitement from our Native American citizens. Where have we heard this before?
So here's my pledge to you. I will be a commander-in-chief that will have the back of the military. I won't trash talk. I won't be a divider-in-chief or an agitator-in-chief. I won't be out there blowharding, talking a big game without backing it up. I think the next president needs to be a lot quieter, but send a signal that we're prepared to act in the national security interests of this country, to get back in the business of creating a more peaceful world. Please clap.
Please clap. I'm sorry, Jeb. I couldn't resist. I'm absolutely convinced that the food industry is one of the places where dumbassery is most prevalent. It seems that a lot of food companies want to engage in food eco-follies. I told you we went to dinner on or lunch on Sunday with our daughter and son-in-law and our granddaughter. And, of course, well, I'll tell you where we went. I'm not embarrassed to tell you where we went. We went to Ted's Montana Grill. And I'm not going to tell you which one, but we went to Ted's Montana Grill, and I knew, because I eat there more than I should, and I know they have, and have for as long as I can remember, always had paper straws. But I also knew that Tamara probably didn't remember they had paper straws, so I very politely, when the iced teas were brought, and there were no straws, because they keep the straws in a little kind of a jar in the middle of the table, I very quickly pulled one out, unwrapped it, and put it in Tamara's iced tea for her, pretending that I was trying to be, chivalrous and nice. I just wanted to watch the reaction on her face when she put the straw in her mouth and realized it was a paper straw. And I couldn't do that if she unwrapped it and saw it. Well, the minute she put the paper straw to her mouth, she went, pulled it out, threw it down on the table, reached into her purse, and pulled out her own plastic straw. That's the kind of woman that I live with. Back to the food companies. I think these companies sometimes signal their virtue. They do virtue signaling by serving food ostensibly enviro-friendly, molded fiber bowls. Yeah, not a plastic bowl, not a styrofoam bowl, a environmentally molded fiber bowls. Unlike, you see, and here's why. Unlike styrofoam clamshells or wax-lined soup cups, fiber products feel like they'd turn into mush on a leaf pile. They seem to offer convenience without the karmic debt, a way to eat that leaves no trace. How nice is it that we have such first world problems that we're able to eat without guilt gnawing at us for, somehow raping the planet. But as usual with environmentalist virtue signaling, appearance is one thing, reality is another. All molded fiber bowls contain PFAS, or per and polyfluora, blah, 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 substances, a broad class of more than 4,000 fluorinated compounds that do not biodegrade naturally in the environment. This means that the bowls used at restaurants like Chipotle and Sweet Green are not truly compostable, as has been claimed. Instead, they are most likely to be toxic, adding to the chemical load of the very soil and water that they're supposed to help improve. Nonetheless, they boast that their molded fiber bowls are 100% compostable. Health effects at the individual level are still unknown. The story continues. The very worst PFAS chemicals are linked to a range of serious health outcomes, from colitis and thyroid disorders to kidney and testicular cancers, and have been mostly phased out of production in the United States. Well, tell Chipotle that. These bowls are more likely to contain newer varieties that are just as persistent in the environment and are of grave concern to scientists, but have not been studied as closely for potential health effects. Health effects on humans are actually less of a concern to the environmental nut jobs than they are of concerned about environmental effects or health effects on animals. Here's an example. They've shed a lot of tears over the fate of sea turtles that end up getting plastic straws stuck in their nostrils. This ends up being a major justification for the war on plastic straws. Interestingly, part of 60 Minutes on Sunday night was devoted to, if not, because I finally quit watching, was about plastic and how plastics are absolutely destroying the environment. So 60 Minutes flies out to Midway Island. They go out to the atolls, and they find these birds, dodo birds of some sort, that have plastic in them. Now, there are thousands upon thousands of birds, of these birds, and some obviously ingest plastics. They see the shiny object and they think it's something to eat, and they pick it up and they eat it. So out of thousands and thousands of birds that are apparently eating all this plastic, I would have thought that all places, 60 Minutes, that I would have been then given a video tour of the thousands and thousands of birds that have died because of ingesting plastics. They gave me 2 examples. And I'm talking about literally tens, if not hundreds of thousands of these birds, because if you're familiar with Midway, you really can't get there anymore. You have to have special permission. It's public land, but you need special permission to go to Midway, to go to the atolls, to these pristine beaches, except there's some plastic on it and they're trying to clean up the plastic. But the point of saying all of that is to say this. Throughout all of the 60 Minute stories, I kept waiting. I kept waiting to see film, footage, photos, drawings, stick caricature, something of sea turtles that have plastic straws stuck in their nostrils. Nada. Not a one. Now, McDonald's has responded with paper straws, just like Ted's. Now, at the McDonald's, where I go get a Diet Coke occasionally, they don't have the paper straws yet. They still have plastic. Last year, McDonald's axed plastic straws, even though they were recyclable, in all of its United Kingdom branches as part of a green drive. But the U.S. food giant says the new paper straws are not yet easy to recycle and should be put into easy to recycle and should not be put into general waste. So customers bitch that the new straws dissolve before a drink can be finished. No doubt environmentalists regard this as just a pittance for us to pay to save the turtles or to save those birds. Remember, there were hundreds of thousands of birds, and 60 Minutes was unable to show me more than 2 or 3. And I didn't see one turtle. It's pretty likely that before long, there will just be no straws. They will go onto the list of what dumbasses take away from us. Buy your plastic. This is like every time there's a story about gun control or there's a mass shooting, price of ammo. You should actually deal in ammo like a commodity. Price goes up, you buy it when the price is low, sell it when the price goes up. Now we can do the same thing with straws. Good grief. Oh, before I forget about it, some of you asked about the Jason Tiller video that I played yesterday, part of which I played yesterday, about the top 10 contradictions of the left. And you said that you couldn't find it on YouTube. Well, it is on YouTube, but it's not under Jason Tiller. It's under Blue Collar Logic. So if you go to youtube.com and look under Blue Collar Logic, you'll find top 10 contradictions of the left. He posted it on August 16th of this month. August 16th of this year. Yeah, just like 4 days ago. So top 10 contradictions of the left, Blue Collar Logic. You can find it on YouTube. It's there. I never really think about professions in terms of how many men or women are involved in them. I mean, we have females doing everything imaginable. We have males doing everything imaginable. And then we've got those doing everything imaginable too. But it's now infected, or has actually reduced, I should say. Probably I think it's a better way to put it. It has infected academia, but it's actually reduced academia to sort of a freak show. And now that freak show comes complete with bearded ladies. This comes to us from Campus Reform. Female paleontologists, including some from the University of California, Berkeley, well, end of story right there, right? That's all you need to know. UC Berkeley, are now wearing fake beards to highlight alleged gender bias in the field of paleontology. Now, let's stop for a moment. Gender bias means either that feminists are still able to dream up demands that have not yet been met, or that even if they can't, they still feel oppressed anyway. Campus Reform says, the Bearded Lady Project tries to show that, quote, you don't have to be a man to love field work and contribute to science, according to a UC Berkeley news release. Well, you also don't have to be a dumbass from Berkeley to make a fool of yourself. But it does help, and it kind of goes hand in hand, too. The Bearded Lady photo exhibit has been on display in many different places around the country. 15 UC Berkeley paleontologists are featured in the exhibit. The Bearded Lady Project's going to accomplish its goal, I guess, when white male stereotypes are banished. But the stereotypes of college professors as kooks and feminists, as irrational bullies, well, I think that remains probably true and unchallenged. The Bearded Lady Project. Yeah, you can find it online. There's actually, it's not on YouTube. I think it's on Vimeo. There's actually a trailer for a video about the Bearded Lady Project. No, I'm not going to play it. It's too long, and, well, frankly, I just don't give a rat's ass. Do you remember how I'm always talking about we have such a myopic view of the world, and we think that whatever problems we have today are intractable, and then we don't foresee that there might actually be somebody studying something somewhere, or that, just through serendipity, you suddenly discover a cure for X, whatever X might be. Well, this story reminds me of that premise, that belief that I have, that we shouldn't sit here in this dystopian mental attitude that all of our problems, whether they're real or perceived problems, are problems that can't be solved. Take, for example, the idea that somehow eating meat and having all these cows that are farting everywhere, that's going to somehow kill the planet. Well, apparently there's a puffy pink seaweed that can stop cows from burping out methane, and it's being primed for mass farming by Australian researchers. This particular seaweed species, called Asparagopsis, grows prolifically off the Queensland coast and was the only seaweed found to have the effect in a study 5 years ago led by this group. Even a small amount of the seaweed in a cow's diet was shown to reduce the animal's gases by 99%. Maybe I could use some of this seaweed. Maybe you could use some of this seaweed. Associate Professor Nick Paul, who is the leader of the seaweed research group at the University of the Sunshine Coast, said that if Australia could grow enough of the seaweed for every cow in the nation, the country, Australia, could cut its greenhouse gas emissions by 10% and thus save the world. Now, if we could just do that in the U.S., start growing seaweed, somebody will figure out a way to do it. Trust me. And then cows can continue to burp less, and I can continue to get a cheeseburger. The university has even put out a little video describing their discovery.
So one of the things that people probably don't know is that cows birth a lot of methane. If we can work out ways to stop cows producing methane, then this will have a really big impact on our global greenhouse gas emissions. A group of Australian researchers about 5 years ago found this one particular type of seaweed that when added to the cow feed at less than 2% of the dry matter, it actually completely knocks out methane production. Right here on the Sunshine Coast, it's like the epicenter of biodiversity for this one type of seaweed called Asparagopsis. So it's a red, puffy, pink-ish seaweed that we have off the coast. It's actually pretty common, and you would actually see it if you go snorkeling or at the beach.
So we know the chemical composition of Asparagopsis, and we know the chemical compound that actually reduces the methane production from cows. So we actually want to be able to maximize the concentration of that chemical within the seaweed so we can use less seaweed for the same effect.
Globally, agriculture is responsible for 6% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and methane is actually a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, so it's 28 times the heating potential of CO2. And most of that agricultural production of methane is coming from livestock that are ruminants, so cows, sheep and goats. If we're able to work out how to scale up this seaweed to become at a level that can feed all of the cows and the sheep and the goats around the world, then it's going to have a huge impact on the climate. It's going to address a whole lot of carbon neutral agendas that different countries have, and it's ultimately going to save us all billions of dollars.
Oh, don't you love the little music soundtrack to go with it? Maybe they can just come up with, seaweed straws. I think we need seaweed straws. That's next. It's fashionable, and I know I talk a lot about George Orwell and the Orwellian times that we live in, but I think George Orwell is probably more prescient than we realized. He may have actually predicted what would happen to his own books in the age of Amazon. The world's largest bookseller has failed to avoid selling illegitimate books. Now, what do I mean by illegitimate books? Orwell titles can be found at bargain prices. The only reason I know this is the other day I mentioned, well, it wasn't the other day, it was like maybe a couple of weeks ago, speaking to a Republican County Lincoln Day dinner. I asked how many people had actually read 1984 and suggested that they go on Amazon to do so. And somebody, some smart aleck, there's always a smart aleck in the room, even with me in the room, there's another one. And this individual was on his phone and shouted out, yeah, you can get it for, $8.95 or something. Well, the world's largest bookseller is not making certain that the books it sells are legitimate copies of Orwell's books. Some of the editions are riddled with errors. Some have missing sections. Or worse yet, they have actually been edited to bring them in line with current sensibilities. Now, how Orwellian, you can't get much Orwellian than that. Even the titles are getting messed up. One edition of Animal Farm, a fairy story, referred to itself on the back cover as Animals Farm, a fair story. And the preface referred to another great Orwell work, Homage to Catalonia, as Homepage to Catalonia. Now, Orwell wrote, who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. Well, I think counterfeiters may determine what is in the future for Orwell, and they may well have already written the past. Scott Brown, a prominent California bookseller, noted that the news was now mostly digital. And he says, who can really say what an article really said when it was first published? There's rarely a printed and therefore hard to change version to refer back to. The past is becoming unmoored and unreliable. I think he's exactly right. The same might come to apply even to literary classics. Modern versions of Winston Smith may be revising 1984 as you listen to this. And Orwell's not the only one. In Ray Bradbury's classic Fahrenheit 451, people memorize books so that they will not be lost. But read what an Amazon reviewer had to say. This is not the real Fahrenheit 451. The wording is different. The first chapter is not properly titled. They used the first sentence of the chapter as the title in this book. There are typos. There are spacing issues. They need to advertise that this is not an authentic book. Remember, I've bemoaned the lack of editors. Sloppiness is bad enough. But revising the text to make it more politically correct is even worse. This has apparently occurred with an unauthorized high school edition of the book Down and Out in Paris and London. An Indian version of Animal Farm included this on the copyright page. The author respects all individuals, organizations, and communities, and there is no intention in this novel to hurt any individual, organization, or community. Now, this may have been true, but George Orwell never said that. Well, he didn't say it until now. You can't even trust Amazon. Jeff Bezos, we hardly knew you. I ran across this story, and I guess I am perplexed at why it's a story. I get that the fact that Twitter is doing this might be a story, but if we're shocked, if we're supposed to be shocked by the story, then we haven't been paying attention. The story is about a social media bookmarking site that's run by this entrepreneur, and the site is called Pinboard, not to be confused with Pinterest. This is called Pinboard. And according to Pinboard, Twitter has been distributing sponsored posts from Chinese state media, and these sponsored posts have been criticizing the Hong Kong protesters. Well, duh. Did we expect China to do anything less? 2 months on, the escalating violence in Hong Kong, they write, has taken a heavy toll on the social order, adding that all walks of life in Hong Kong called for a break to be put on the blatant violence and for order to be restored. And then a second sponsored tweet portrayed the public sentiment in Hong Kong as at odds with the protests. This tweet said, Hong Kong citizens call for stopping violence, ending chaos, and restoring order in the city. And then another sponsored tweet on Twitter pushed a video that described Hong Kong's economy as deteriorating, though it didn't link to any of the protests. So on Pinboard, they wrote, every day I go out and see stuff with my own eyes, and then I go to report it on Twitter and see promoted tweets saying the opposite of what I saw in the streets of Hong Kong. Twitter is taking money from Chinese propaganda outfits and running these promoted tweets against the top Hong Kong protest hashtags. Well, I mean, they're promoted tweets. You can see who's promoting them. Do we have to have everything spoon-fed to us? Now, look, the Hong Kong protests, I think we're now almost in the 11th or 12th week of these protests, were sparked by a bill, a piece of legislation, that has since been shelved that would have allowed citizens of Hong Kong to be extradited and actually tried in mainland China, where they wouldn't have all of the civil rights protections that were preserved when Hong Kong was given up by the Brits. Organizers claim that as many as 1.7 million people were out in force in a peaceful protest on Sunday. And look, I looked at the photographs, and it doesn't surprise me in the least. And there have been eruptions of violence in the protests. But on the protest on Sunday, they specifically called for nonviolence. And there wasn't any violence. So I don't get the whole point of the story. Sponsored tweets, promoted tweets on Twitter. Now, I may be wrong about this entirely, but I know that at one time I kind of experimented around with some promoted tweets to see kind of what the reaction. I spent hardly any money at all. But I don't get that we're supposed to be surprised that the Communist government of China is promoting a disinformation campaign on Twitter. Are we then supposed to be surprised for some reason that Facebook or Twitter or anybody else is taking money from the Chinese government? They'll take money from anybody. Hell's bells, they took money from me. Now Twitter said yesterday that it has suspended more than 200,000 accounts that it believes were part of this Chinese government influence campaign that was targeting the protest movement in Hong Kong. The company has now said that it will ban ads from state-backed media companies and expands a prohibition that first applied back in 2017 to 2 Russian entities. They, I guess they don't want to get caught supporting propaganda. They claim that the accounts were suspended for violating the social network platform's terms of service and, quote, because we think this is not how people can come to Twitter to get informed. Really? Okay, whatever. I would bet that a lot of you, and I don't blame you at all, if you wouldn't recognize the name Stacey Abrams. She ran for governor in Georgia, and she got beat. Well, she was on CBS News this morning, and she said this.
You mentioned not conceding the chair of the RNC, Ronna McDaniel. You're smiling because I'm sure you've heard this tweet yesterday. If Stacey Abrams actually cared about integrity of elections, she'd concede the Georgia governor's race that she lost by 55,000 votes. Instead, she's on national TV today still thinking she's won. Why haven't you conceded?
Because concession means to say that the process was fair. But when I run an organization that in 10 days between election night and the night I refused to concede, we received more than 50,000 phone calls of people who were denied the right to vote. I am complicit if I say that that system is fair. I did not deny the legal sufficiency of the election. I am not claiming to be the governor of Georgia, despite what Breitbart and others like to say.
Yeah.
What I have said is that we won the battle of making sure more voices were heard because we had the highest record turnout in Georgia history for Democrats.
And your opponent was in charge of the
My opponent was in charge of the process.
Yes.
But the other thing to remember is, look, because there are more people in the water, that doesn't mean there are fewer sharks.
Okay.
You can have higher turnout, but that doesn't diminish the fact that voter suppression is real and affecting people across the country.
I'm really so tired of this argument about voter suppression, and quite frankly, if I was black, I would be offended by all these blacks and the white limousine liberals telling me that I'm too dumb to register to vote or to get an ID to vote or to show up at the right precinct or anything else. You know, one of the things that Hillary Clinton said that she was actually right about is that when you refuse to accept the results of an election, it corrodes our system and gives rise to more nonsense like Stacey Abrams. Now, the fact of the matter is Hillary Clinton started it, and Democrats like Abrams have continued the attack on our election system. Our electoral system works. If you have Russia trying to influence our elections and is unable to do so, is unable to change a single vote, what makes you think a bunch of Keystone Cop Republicans or a bunch of Keystone Cop Democrats can change the outcome of an election? Oh, actually, maybe the Keystone Cop Democrats can, but they didn't do it in Georgia. I got pulled into Kamala Harris's website. You can find it at kamalaharris.org. And she has a section up there called Combating Violent Hate. Now, I'm opposed to hate. I'm opposed to bigotry. I'm opposed to prejudice. I'm opposed to racism. I'm opposed to all of those things that are just horrific. But I also recognize that we're humans and that some humans are just a-holes. You know them and I know them. But I want you to listen to what she has written, because this ought to scare the crap out of you. Combating violent hate. I don't want to read the whole thing to you. Let me just kind of see if I can work my way through it. She says that she has a very simple message. There are only, quote, very fine people, close quote, you know where that comes from, on one side, and we intend to act and win. Have you ever thought about just how close-minded that is? Their side. Their side is the only side that has very fine people. I guess our side, those of us who oppose Kamala Harris, I guess we're all just racist, homophobes, xenophobes. We're the dregs of society. Here's how we'll do it, she says. I mean, she literally says, quote, here's how we'll do it. We're going to empower federal courts to issue new domestic terrorism prevention orders. Does this sound familiar to those of you whose states may be debating red flag laws? Empower federal courts to issue new domestic terrorism prevention orders to temporarily seize the gun of a suspected terrorist or an individual. Oh, suddenly it's a suspected terrorist or just any old individual who may imminently perpetrate a hate crime. If ever you have listened to me talk about the dangers of hate crime, we are now there. If I go murder, and I know I've said this 1,000 times, but just shut up and listen for a minute. If I go murder somebody, we have laws against murder. If I actually perpetrate a murder and I kill someone and I do it with malice aforethought, I do it in a fit of anger or rage, and I do it in such a way that is just horrific, I may even be subjected to the death penalty. But let's leave the death penalty out of this for a minute. Instead, in a fit of rage, I just take a knife and I just stab it through the heart of somebody because I'm mad at them, and I do it because, well, I woke up that morning and I decided I hated bearded people. Although bearded people, I guess, are not really a protected class. So to make this story fit, I woke up one morning and I decided that I hated Asians. Yeah. And so I went out on the streets with my knife. I was angry. Blood pressure was up. I couldn't even see straight. And I found the first Asian and I stabbed him in the heart. And as I was doing it, somebody heard me say, I hate Asians. And I stabbed and I stabbed and I stabbed until the Asian was dead. Apparently, Kamala Harris wants to stop me if I wake up one morning and I decide that I am fed up with Asians. And I think to myself, or I say to somebody, I'm so mad today I could just kill any Asian I see. Well, if that person apparently believes that I am imminently going to perpetrate a hate crime, they're going to come and take what away? Because you notice I was going to perpetrate my hate crime, and I wasn't going to do it with a gun. I was going to do it with a knife. Now let's take it down even further. Let's say that I wake up and I decide one day that I hate black people. And so I decide that what I'm going to do is I'm going to go stand out in front of, I've got a really good friend who's a black man, and I'm going to go stand in front of his house, and I'm going to scream the N-word at his house, just the top of my lungs, just scream it as loud as I can. Now, I'm probably violating, I could probably be arrested for, I don't know, disturbing the peace, public nuisance. I mean, any number of things. Have I perpetrated a hate crime by screaming the N-word at this individual that I just decided today I'm mad about? A hate crime. No underlying violence, just making a public nuisance of myself on a public sidewalk, disturbing the peace in a tranquil, idyllic neighborhood. She writes, from El Paso to the Tree of Life Synagogue, and from Poway to Mother Emanuel Church, one thing is clear. Guns. Oh, we finally get to guns. Guns are the weapon of choice for domestic terrorists and perpetrators of hate crimes. Indeed, in an average year, over 10,300 hate crimes in America involve a gun, more than 28 each day. Now, the 10,300 hate crimes is a hyperlink, so I decided to click on it, and it takes me to Everytown. Moms demand action. Disarm the hate, the deadly intersection of guns and hate crimes. Now, when you read through the story, you find out that, okay, there might be a lot of hate crimes in the United States. But how many of those hate crimes actually involve the perpetrating of violence against somebody else? You see, there's a huge distinction between an act of violence with a gun and just possessing a gun and screaming hateful things at somebody. And in fact, she goes on to say, whether it's violent, racist threats or anti-immigrant manifestos, signs of impending violence are often evident before tragedy strikes. According to one study, 42% of mass shooters exhibit concern concerning behavior before their crimes. Concerning behavior? Or they actually make threats. You see, there's a huge difference between just being angry and exhibiting aberrant behavior and actually going out and making a threat and carrying it out. She then writes, to disarm domestic terrorists and hate crime perpetrators. Oh, so now we've split them in two. We've now gone from domestic terrorists, that's now a category, and hate crime perpetrators are now a separate category. So now she says to disarm domestic terrorists and hate crime perpetrators before they are able to carry out their attacks, Harris will empower, I like how she puts it in third person, Harris will empower courts to issue new domestic terrorism prevention orders. When passed into law, this new tool will allow certain individuals, she doesn't say who, including law enforcement officers and family members, is that all? To petition a federal court to temporarily restrict a person's access to guns if they exhibit clear evidence of dangerousness. Dangerousness? So now we've gone from actually imminently perpetrating a crime. We've now gone from an impending act of violence to exhibiting concerning behavior, and now we've gone all the way down to, evidence of dangerousness. I'm exhibiting evidence of dangerous right now because I cannot tell you how angry this makes me just reading it. She's going to take executive action to close the online gun sales loophole by requiring platforms like armslist.com to perform background checks. She says 1 in 5 gun purchases in America occur without a background check. What's she going to do? Put cops on literally every block in every crime rat-infested S-hole town or county in this country trying to stop criminals from selling guns to each other? She wants to create a police state. This is how dangerous people buy arms or buy guns, she says. Last year alone, over 1 million firearm ads were posted on Arms List for gun sales that would not require a background check. In America, loaded guns should not be a few clicks away for any domestic terrorist with a laptop. Arms List. Have you been to Arms List? Well, I'm on Arms List right now and I'm looking. And I found a really nice, I shouldn't say really nice, but it looks like it's in really good condition. It's a private party sale registered on, on August 25, 2014. Gee, I just clicked on the first one I saw. Up for sale is my Glock 14 Gen 4. One box shot through it. Comes with box, docks, and lock. Practically brand new. Text works best. Here's the phone number. Yes, I'm in Colorado Springs because it doesn't have a Colorado Springs area code. We'll listen to any reasonable offer. All local laws apply. Buyer pays for transfer. In other words, I've got to go through an FFL to buy this gun. But that doesn't stop Kamala Harris from telling you about how dangerous it is that Arms List is out there selling guns left and right without background checks. Let me get back to her website. Let me click back to her website. She says that if Congress fails to pass universal background checks, legislation within her first 100 If Congress fails to pass universal background check legislation within her first 100 days as president, Harris will take executive action to require websites like armslist.com to conduct background checks by clarifying that dealing in firearms can mean facilitating private gun sales online for profit. I don't think she understands how this works. But just ignore the whole thing about private transactions, FFL transfers, forget all of that. And instead, I want you to just focus for a moment on the whole idea that there are 10,300 hate crimes in America that involve a gun, not all of which involve violence with the use of that gun. And she wants to go from hate crimes all the way down to clear evidence of dangerousness. This is the attack on the Second Amendment. So here's how I see it. These domestic terrorism prevention orders would temporarily restrict a person's access to guns if they exhibit clear evidence of dangerousness, whatever the hell that means, including violent racist threats or race or anti-immigrant manifestos. Now, her plan to disarm violent hate, if you read through it, is vague at best. So it's hard to say whether it would be consistent with the First Amendment. Now, if the bill that she imagines would merely create a federal red flag law focused on a subset of people deemed a threat to others, that's going to be bad enough, since these laws generally don't even include due process. But her description of the problem that she's trying to address suggests that constitutionally protected speech might itself be enough to suspend someone's Second Amendment rights. Remember, she said this, from El Paso to the Tree of Life Synagogue and from Poway to Mother Emanuel Church, one thing is clear. Guns are the weapon of choice for domestic terrorists and perpetrators of hate crimes. Whether it's violent racist threats or anti-immigrant manifestos, signs of impending violence are often evident before tragedy strikes. Well, that might be true if you have hindsight, which is 20/20. But it does not mean that everybody who's a racist, everybody that's a nativist, it doesn't even mean that all white supremacists, it doesn't even mean that anti-Semites who express their views, or even a significant percentage of those people who do that, are bent on mass murder. Now, she mentions the 2018 shooting where Robert Bowers murdered 11 people at a Pittsburgh synagogue. And before he went on his rampage, he posted a bunch of anti-Semitic comments on the website Gab, G-A-B. Now, in his bio on Gab, he described Jews as the children of Satan. And if you read what he wrote, it's just, well, he just rails against Jews and the Latin Americans whose illegal immigration he believed they were facilitating. He was obsessed with Jews. But the clearest intimation of impending violence did not appear until the morning of the attack, when he wrote this: the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society likes to bring invaders in that kill our people. Well, screw your optics. I'm going in. Well, by the time that message was posted, it was too late for the cops to intervene, let alone go get a domestic terrorism prevention order. So you see, it's not clear how her law supports or would distinguish between run-of-the-mill anti-Semites and the very tiny percentage of them, like this dirtbag, that translate their hateful beliefs into actual action. Now, if everybody who circulates messages like the ones Bauer posted become candidates for gun confiscation orders, that law is going to cast a huge net that undermines the First Amendment as well as the Second Amendment. But let's go to the other situation that she describes. She mentions the 2015 attack in which Dylann Roof murdered 9 people at that Black Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina. If you go back several months before the attack, Dylann Roof posted a manifesto in which he described blacks as being inferior to whites, minimized the evils of slavery, he defended segregation, and he called for, and listen closely, he called for, quote, drastic action to, quote, take back the country. I've got the full passage in front of me. Listen to it. I am not in the position to, alone, go into the ghetto and fight. I chose Charleston because it is the most historic city in my state, and at one time had the highest ratio of blacks to whites in the country. We have no skinheads, no real KKK, no one doing anything but talking on the internet. Well, someone has to have the bravery to take it to the real world, and I guess that has to be me. Now, I don't want you to think about that passage, knowing what we know now. I want you to think about reading that passage before Dylann Roof walked into the church and massacred those people. Fight? Taking it to the real world? Those are ambiguous at best. And I think it's hard to see how his venting would qualify as a true threat unprotected by the First Amendment. Now, it's hard to do because we have the hindsight of knowing what he was doing or what he ended up doing. But those words alone, in my opinion, are not actionable enough to go take somebody's guns away, or for that matter, to take away his First Amendment rights. You see, living in a free and open society is difficult, and it's dangerous. In combination with the other evidence that we may have gathered afterwards, Dylann Roof's talk might suffice to show that somebody poses a significant danger, the standard typically prescribed by a lot of red flag laws. But when taken by itself, racist pontificating is constitutionally protected. Let me say that again, because I know this makes some people uncomfortable. Racist pontificating is constitutionally protected speech. And it's rather troubling that Harris does not even mention freedom of speech as a consideration, because Kamala Harris doesn't care about the First Amendment. She only cares about taking away your Second Amendment rights. Why is that? Because you can't take away First Amendment rights until you have initially taken away Second Amendment rights. Now, she says that the law she favors would be aimed at individuals who may imminently perpetrate a hate crime. I have no clue what that means. And I have no clue, and I guarantee you this, she has no clue what she means either. All she's doing is playing to her base. But it's dangerous doing that. This woman could be elected. I don't think she will be, but she could be elected. And if she was elected, the devil's clearly in the details. But this is the kind of action that they will take. Because while you and I focus and think that this is about the Second Amendment, and to them right now it is about the Second Amendment, but if they can take away the Second Amendment, how do you and I protect ourselves against a tyrannical government that would then take away our First Amendment, our Fourth Amendment, our Fifth Amendment rights? That's the concern you should have. And I think this is a good time for a taxpayer relief shot. If for no other reason than to remind us exactly why I'm such a stickler about the law of self-defense and our Second Amendment rights. Hang on, I'll be right back. Let's go to WSB-TV, Atlanta, Georgia. The story goes like this.
An intruder who broke into his home in the middle of the night. Now, the shootout took place on Valley Brook Lane in South Fulton County there at that home. And Channel 2's Kristen Holloway talked to police who say it all started when that homeowner heard the sound of breaking glass.
Frightening moments for a South Fulton man who woke up after hearing glass break inside his home.
The homeowner exited his bed, grabbed his weapon, and started toward the area where he heard the glass breaking. As he approached that area, he encountered a subject in his home.
Lieutenant Derek Rogers says seconds later, the homeowner and the intruder exchanged gunfire, and the intruder was shot and killed.
I want to pause this one for just a moment, because I talked to the Abel Shepherd group on Friday, and we talked to, I made a comment about when the glass is breaking in my front door. I don't necessarily wait or say, hey, could you guys show some ID in case it's a cops conducting a no-knock raid and they happen to have the wrong house? No, somebody breaks through my front door. By the time I sit up in bed, gather my senses that someone's breaking into my house, reach into my side table, grab my Smith & Wesson, head to my bedroom door, and open it, they're probably at my bedroom door. If those are cops and it's a no-knock raid, there's a shootout. And unfortunately, people are probably going to be killed. And unfortunately, it's probably going to be me because I'm not going to be wearing body armor. But some cops are probably going to get injured too. It's why I hate no-knock raids, and it's why I think they're incredibly dangerous, as the red flag laws will be dangerous to cops. But let's go back to the scenario. You hear the breaking glass. You hear the door. You groggily wake up. You reach into your bedside table, and depending on where your bedroom is in relation to the front door, by the time you get your gun in your hand and you get your your trigger finger ready, that individual may be breaking into your bedroom door. And at that moment, shots are going to be fired. Because all you know is someone who is not supposed to be there has broken into your home. That's precisely what happened here. Shots were fired the minute the homeowner confronted the dirtbag breaking into his house. A split-second moment.
Has minor injuries. This led to a large police presence here on Valley Brook Lane for hours. Police think the homeowner was the only one inside the home, but they called in SWAT for assistance.
SWAT was called in to clear the home to ensure that no one else was inside of that home.
And there is a classic taxpayer relief shot. I mean, it is a classic one. And it's exactly why, in terms of self-defense, we have not only a natural God-given right of self-defense, but we're able to use guns to do that because of the Second Amendment. Thanks for listening to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. You know the drill, so I won't waste your time. But you can go to the website, michaelbrowntoday.com. All the social media places to follow me are there, and you can get the podcast wherever podcasts are available. And if you would share it with your friends, well, the check's in the mail. Talk to you tomorrow.